Okay, great. I'm just letting a few more people in here. So welcome everybody. This is the third workshop in our three-part workshop series for this summer's inaugural Ohio 5 CODEX Summer Institute. For those of you who haven't yet heard me talk about the Institute, just a quick thumbnail sketch of it. Here is something new that we're trying this year. The idea is just building on a lot of the experience that we've seen throughout the Ohio 5 through various grant-funded initiatives and independent work, wanting to kind of create a space and time, in this case a week over the summer, for teams of faculty, staff, students, librarians, technologists to come together to think together and plan together, whether it's an entire course or assignment or a co-curricular project that incorporates a significant digital component, but that also really aims to kind of foster some critical engagement with that tool. And so we have 7 teams attending the Institute this summer, and who are working together all week. And as I said, this is the third of the 3 workshops that we're hosting this week, and wanting to welcome Alex Alderman to the third session. Alex is an instructional designer at Kenyon College, also has the honor and privilege to be part of one of the CODEX teams, led by Micah Myers at Kenyon and with Joe Murphy. And so I think the topic today is really about focusing a little bit more on assessment, developing effective assessments for student work on digital projects. We looked at the proposals that came in this year for the Institute and really tried to think about, what were some sort of more instructional experiences, workshops that applied sort of universally to all of those projects, but also had broad applicability to everyone else, and tried to design them in that way. So each year, these Institute workshops will be really designed for the particular cohort, but especially given that these are virtual this year, we wanted to invite lots of other folks as well who could attend. And so we do have a mix here of people who are attending the Institute and people who are just joining in for this workshop, and some have attended the others as well. So just want to welcome everyone, and I'm going to turn it over to Alex to get us started. And just a reminder, of course, if you are not muted and not speaking, it would be helpful to mute yourself. You can unmute yourself to ask a question, raise a hand, or if Alex has other suggestions for you to reach out, he can say. But otherwise, I will stop babbling and let Alex get started. So thank you very much, Alex.
Sure. Okay, can I share my screen? Are you giving me the option to do that? Okay, cool. All right. Okay, for people who have lower internet connections or otherwise are having trouble viewing this screen, I've put the link to the Google Slides presentation that I'm doing in the chat, so you can see it there. And other than that, I'm just going to switch over now. And okay. And hopefully, I think you'll all disappear from my view. If there's anything urgent, please, Ben, let me know by yelling my name. But yeah, otherwise, I think if I hit present, no, I can still see people, but I can't see the chat. That's the one. Okay. So this is the general title we've given this is Developing Effective Assessments for Student Contributions to Digital Projects. This is a big topic, and it's come up a few times this week. This is the rough agenda for the next 2 hours. To give you an idea of where we are, I'm going to probably collapse some of these things as we go through them, but this is my roadmap and what my slides are based on in terms of the time I'm giving to these things. So when I pitched this presentation, I thought this was going to be mostly about courses where the digital project was one element among many elements in the course. And one thing I've realized in the course of this week is for several courses, the digital project is the course, or is the main focus of the course. So that made me rethink a bit. But I'm still working within the same framework. I just gone a little bit broader out in how I'm thinking. So to give a little bit of an introduction to myself, my name is Alex Alderman. I have been an instructional designer at the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College for the past 3.5 years. In that time, I have gotten to work with several faculty, I think especially in humanities, but also dance, drama, and film on various digital projects, which has been exciting for me. Before I was an instructional designer, I was also a vagabond professor of classics for 7 years. And I have some experience, a lot of experience with group projects and also digital projects from that work as well. So that's going to come in a bit in terms of illustration. But that's where we're going to head with this. So starting off, these are some questions that I've heard voiced in the discussions that we've had as a group over the past few days. So what do? Do you assess students individually? Do you assess them as a group? How do you grade assessments? Do you grade assessments? How frequently do you assess students in these projects? Do you make them turn in small things all the time along the way, or do you make it more free-form to allow more creativity? And how do you actually grade these products when they're done? Do you grade the virtuosity of the digital project, or do you grade it according to disciplinary standards? So these are some of the things that are going to come up in the course of the next 2 hours. But spoiler alert, okay, I wanted to give you, I didn't want to leave you waiting, anticipation. I don't think these questions have wrong or right answers. I think there are personal and practical reasons for choosing different options in any of these cases. But I do believe that making your preferences more transparent to yourself and your team will help you plan assessment strategies for your course. And I also believe that making your preferences more transparent to your students will help them to gauge their expectations and perform better in the course. So that's a lot of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get you to think about what your preferences are and how those are informing what you will end up deciding to do, but also so that you can help give you some guidance in articulating those things to students so that they'll understand where you're coming from and will be able to work with you better. That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so the first part of this I refer to as establishing your priorities. So it's important to think of these digital projects in some kind of project management framework. And in a project management framework, you think about stakeholders. Well, in this course, who is the most important stakeholder? In my case, I'm guessing that's you. The professor, or speaking of the professor, but then also team members are also going to be very important. Students are also going to be stakeholders, and then whatever audience you have is going to be a stakeholder, and other people who are invested in this. In order to keep this project functioning well, you're going to need to align it properly to the interests of the stakeholders in the project. Alignment is a core metaphor in course design, and you'll see it used in lots of different ways. It's going to come up in a big way in the second half of this presentation. But it's a description basically of how different elements of a course relate to each other and to the priorities of the course especially. All right, so the first kind of priority for the course I would like for you to consider. Why are you teaching this subject? So this might be too big of a question, but I think it's an important one to ask. One helpful way of thinking through that question is a teaching goals inventory, which was developed by Thomas Angelo and Kay Patricia Cross, which came out of the Course Assessment Techniques book. And there is a digital version of it hosted by the University of Iowa. This is a very long assessment, but it'll give you a report, which is helpful, and that could be a good thing to use as a touchstone for working with lots of different people. And the course, sort of for you to understand, kind of a self-reflection exercise to understand why it is that you teach. Now, this is a long assessment, and I'm not asking you to complete this. But what I did ask the team members for CODEX to complete was sort of the last segment of this. And the last segment of this, of the teaching goals inventory, it lists 6 general kinds of teaching goals and has the teacher select the one which is like most important to them. So I think another good way of doing this is to rank 6 the general teaching goals from Angelo and Cross in terms of their importance to you. So I've looked through the results that people put in. I think one of the things that's helpful to see, sometimes people couldn't decide on which was first. You had 2 things that were their first goal, and sometimes things were of so little importance to a person that they did not even bother ranking them. They indicated by having nothing on the side at all that they were not interested in doing that. But I think this is a good, quick form of self-assessment. Other team members especially, and also perhaps students, but at least But I think that's probably mitigated through other things. It's more like a way of helping you think about how you present yourself to students so that you help them to know what they need to do in order to get the most out of your teaching. Okay, that's not the only kind of priority here. Now, another kind of question that I think can get lost in the shuffle. When you're doing some kind of a group digital project, why are you doing group work? Because I think a lot of times people's explanations sound alike to each other, even though they actually involve other kinds of things. So I tried to articulate some real differences here. So for instance, one reason why a person could have a group project is because they want to teach specific lessons about cooperation to students. That they have a specific model of cooperation in mind, or certain ideas about the benefits of cooperation, or how that's organized, or how that comes to be, and they want that to be a lesson learned in context, in the actual context of a group project. On the other hand, some people want something quite different. They want students to learn their own lessons. So they want a group project to be a kind of sandbox where students develop interpersonal skills by recognizing their mutual needs, and then like learning how to get along with people of different kinds of personality types out in the wild, and then shaping their own behavior to better work with those people. So this is a radically different approach than the one which is teaching specific lessons about cooperation. Another kind of reason to do group work is disciplinary specific. Sometimes in the classroom, students are always doing individual work, but the field that you're involved in actually involves a lot of collaboration. So this is especially true in the STEM world, where a lot of times, like when students come into a STEM environment, they think that what they need to be doing is memorizing and learning methods, but a lot of times what they need to be doing is working together in a project to accomplish a goal. One reason to use group work in your course is to give students, to actually allow them a chance to model the collaborative practices in your field inside the classroom. And if that's your plan, that's going to greatly influence the structure of that project. A much thinner justification for group work is to distribute labor that students cannot complete alone. And this is how I really came to group work. And I'm going to give you a concrete example of this in a little minute here. And then finally, another reason that's really thematic in this current environment for getting students to do group work is to get students more engaged with their classmates, especially in an online context where they're not having daily interactions. So if they're not going to have sustained interactions on a daily basis, it can be helpful to create an environment for them to just relate socially to each other in a way that ties that kind of social interaction back into the classroom, so that they have that kind of personal connection that might be lost in a remote environment. And these are all things that I've done in various capacities or assisted faculty doing. So group work, why group work is a big question to ask. Another question to ask, why a digital project? And this has been exciting for me because I've heard a lot of different things coming out of faculty in the CODEX project over the past couple of days. So one reason to do a digital project is because students might be skilled at certain things in your discipline within the context they've had the chance to operate in, but there are other kinds of contexts that are opened up through the use of technology that will allow them to apply the very same skills in a broader context. That's one way of doing that. Another way is rather than asking students to transfer what they know to a new environment, you might want something quite different from that, which is to break students out of received habits. So if they're in the habit of doing things in a very similar way every class they're in, you might want to change the context on them so that they have to reimagine what it is that your field does in an entirely different context. So that's quite a bit different. Another kind of alternative reason for a digital project is if you think that new technology is important, and you think students just need to gain familiarity with new technology. And this could be for having skills in the job world. This could be for having better skills for further academic work, whatever. But if the idea is that students, are not within the current environment of your discipline able to experiment with new technology, you might think that's important for itself. And if you think it's important for itself, that will also affect your assessments. A kind of a more integrated way here. If you might choose a digital project for students to understand the effects of new technology on your subject. So for instance, if someone's teaching a class on digital humanities and you're going from something like a close reading model to like a big reading model or something, like how is it that this discipline that you're actually currently working on is being impacted by the availability of new technology, and how is that going to change what's going on with your field? That might be another option. And I think another general kind of reason people use digital projects is just because they think that technology is cool, or at least students think that technology is cool. And this might be a way to get students to be more excited about the class. Is if they are bored with the same kinds of lessons, maybe give them a little variety. That generally helps keeping people engaged with the course. All right. And this is my last set of options here. I'm going to have you, when we get down to breakout discussion, these are the things I'm going to be asking you to focus on. But first, I'm going to show you some examples. So the last question here, how are you actually using assessments? Because there's lots of different ways. Are you using assessments to measure students' progress? That's a very common thing. Do you also use assessments to reward students for good study habits and punish them for bad ones? Do you have a kind of behavioral use of assessment? Do you want assessments to be learning exercises in themselves? Do you want students to have to, it's not so much a measurement as it actually, like in the course of an assessment, they actually have to improve their knowledge in order to do well in the assessment. Do you have some kind of system for using assessments to evaluate your own teaching methods, independent of what you're thinking of student performance? Which could be a general survey of students' reactions, but could be, say, a comparison of a set assessment year after year after year, using different methods or different contexts before I use the digital project, afterward, that kind of thing. So these are different kinds of assessment strategies. And I don't think any of them is inherently evil, but you might not have the option of using them because if it's a one-off course, you're not going to be able to assess it every year. And there's in terms of that kind of behavioral based assessment, that might be necessary within a certain context. In another context, it might be too intrusive. All right, so I wanted to show how these different kinds of considerations applied in a group digital project, which I put together a very long time ago, back in the spring of 2008, when I was a visiting lecturer at Pacific Lutheran University in Classics. So this course was Greek civilization, and it presented me with some specific challenges. A big one was the variety of students involved. So it was an open enrollment 300 level course. So it counted for a 300 level course, but there were no prerequisites at all for this course. Like students did not need to have had Western civilization or an introduction to history course or an introduction to composition course. They didn't need to have anything. They could just sign up for it. So that was it. So it was an open level 300 course. And within that course, I had a lot of good students. Students, I would say, were good. In retrospect, they were good students. But they were not, I would say none of them was at an advanced level in my field, or what I would consider to be my field, which would be something like, or this course, which would be the history of the ancient world. There was not one student in the classroom who had a strong background in the history of the ancient world. In fact, this was only 2 courses at the college that actually dealt with the history of the ancient world. So, either they had done Greek civilization or Roman civilization. If they'd done Roman civilization, they were familiar with that. But generally, when students did one or the other, so they really didn't have any prior experience with primary sources. They didn't have much experience looking for secondary sources in this field. And they did not know what historical problems looked like in the ancient world versus in the modern world. And they didn't know how to form them. In discussions I had with students who had been in previous iterations of this course, there had been a final paper, but the final papers had been things like a student read a book on Greeks in Egypt and then wrote a book report on it. or a lot of students wrote about Alexander the Great. What was he really like? So those are not problems in ancient history, and that was a real issue. That was a real problem because this was the most advanced course offered in ancient history at that college, and I thought students should understand these different things. But I had students who were archaeology students who liked the ancient world but didn't really approach it as a historian or approach primary sources. I had historians who had no experience with the ancient world, and then I had lots of first year and second year students who were taking this for some kind of area requirement who were not familiar with any of these things. Another problem I had with just the structure of the class was that it only met twice a week. So, and what I had learned teaching the Roman civilization course the previous year was that if I gave students an assignment on Monday, like a paper, students would complete the assignment and then none of them would do the reading for the day. So what this meant was I basically had to use the learning management system to extend classroom work outside of the classes in order to adjust for this behavioral expectation. So that's what I did. So I made frequent use of the learning management system so that we met Mondays and Wednesdays, but students turned in papers on Fridays so that they weren't up all night writing that, unable to read. And then I created this digital project that you'll see all online in the LMS as a way for me to avoid having them use class time as a way to work on the projects. So the project that I had them work on was something I called the Polis Wiki Project, which was a set of student wikis on Greek polis, which is to say city-states other than Athens and Sparta. It was graded as a group, 10% of the final grade, and there were a total of 5 deadlines, including 4 intermediate draft deadlines for different sections. There were required sections for what had to be in the wiki, but the division of work was up to the students. I also had an extra credit part of this assignment, which went to students for editing the Wikipedia page on the individual polis on Wikipedia, which let them get a free grade on a quiz, basically a 10 out of 10 on a quiz. And what this Wiki project led up to was that students had the option to write a paper instead of a final at the end of this. So I thought, the required sections of this were things like a timeline, going through here, a glossary, reports on primary sources, so summaries of relevant primary sources, an annotated bibliography of secondary sources, a brief history of that polis, like written in narrative form, and then a page which was current historical problems with that polis. So that's what students had to produce. And I thought if they could do all of those things, they should be able to write a paper. It was only the writing that was left to do because the research had been done. So that was my idea for that. So what were my priorities? And this is, I want you to notice this structure here because that's what I want you to pay attention to in a minute. In terms of my teaching priorities, I wanted students to learn the research skills necessary for writing a paper, even though I didn't think that they were really capable of writing the paper, at least not all of them. Maybe 4 out of 30, or even where I think at the level they could write a research paper even with this guidance. I wanted to create, in terms of my group work goals, it was really a matter of division of labor. I wanted to create a reasonable workload for students of all years. And I wanted to have differentiation of instruction for different skill levels. So if students were in a group and they were the most advanced student in that group, then I thought they would take on more advanced work and then the other people and then farm out grunt work to other people in the group. Why was it a digital project? It was important that it be an accessible technological platform, in this case, the LMS Wiki, because I wanted to devote no training at all to my students. Like students just had to be able to use it easily. And I was going to be the only technical consult person on there. One advantage of the system was that students would be able to view each other's work, which I liked, because then they could see how other classes were making progress, and they could format their things to look like other students, kind of keep up. At the same time, they weren't in danger of academic dishonesty from this because everybody had a totally different area of ancient Greece that they were working on. So the content was going to be different in every form. I also liked that I could view the progress and I could see which students had contributed to the wiki. I could also give feedback on the progress without using class time. These were all things that were benefits of that digital platform. In terms of assessment, I had what were kind of intermediate deadlines, which functioned as ungraded formative assessments for large groups, just to keep them on track. I had my general thought was that having a group assessment, them all getting a group, led to some kind of accountability. But I also allowed for optional assessments like that extra credit or that optional paper at the end, which let people do extra. If they wanted to, if they were if they learned more, if they were capable more, they could get something more out of the project and do something with it. So how did this go? Well, it was mixed results. I thought that students did make progress in the skills I wanted them to learn. At least some of them did. I was assessing them as groups on this work, so I didn't really know. I didn't go through a fine-tooth comb to see how they was doing. And a lot of students, even though the system could track individual contributions, a lot of students just became the uploader for their group because they were the most technologically savvy person. So other people wrote stuff and they uploaded everything. So that kind of defeated that purpose. Some groups had difficulty with members completing their portions before assigned deadlines, but the assigned deadlines were just formative feedback deadlines, so that didn't impact final grades. And by the end, everybody completed every element to some degree. The LMS wiki would let me verify which students were contributing in cases where there were arguments between students. There was that, well, you should have been the person who submitted it, so that was nice. But the real downer on this was that out of 30-some students, only one student completed the optional paper. And I think what really happened was that even though I thought a lot of students were capable of writing that paper by the end, the smart students, they were also smart about managing their workload and knew that it would be easier for them just to ace the final than to go out and do this whole creative thing. And a lot of them were seniors and they wanted to party and hang out, and that's how that worked. So anyway, so there were issues there. Okay, so that's a whole from soup to nuts history of that course. Here are a couple courses that I've worked on since I come to Kenyon, which are in a much more abbreviated form. Okay, so this is a very cool course, and I put a link here if you want to an article on the Kenyon website, which also links out to some examples of student work. But the course was called The Choreographer, which has been offered 3 times, 2016, 2017, 2019. The first time with Julie Brody and the other 2 times with Belinda Craig Quijada. And so it's called The Choreographer. So it's a class about teaching students to learn, teaching students to design sequences of movement. It's choreography, it's a dance class. Now, in this case, students, the function of group work was done through the GLCA, the Global Great Lakes College Association, as well as the GLAA, the Global Liberal Arts Alliance, where it was part of their exchange program where faculty in one course in the United States would co-teach a course or have shared elements of a course with faculty at a liberal arts college in another country, in another culture, so that those faculty and students could relate to each other and collaborate. So there were lots of reasons to do this kind of group work involving participants in the United States and other cultures, which were essential to the project and essential to those foundation's goals. In the most recent iteration of this project, the theme here was that students were designing movements based on other students' experiences. So students in the other country, in this case, Ecuador, would relate their experiences, and then a student at Kenyon would design a dance sequence for that person. So this was a way of kind of breaking out of the interiority of the design process. That was the idea here. The reason it was it needed to be a digital project was in order to effectively collaborate and respond to students in this different culture. And the idea was that students would learn about what it was like to be a part of a different culture. So we used Slack as a communication channel and usually Zoom as a channel for teleconferencing between students. Within Slack, faculty could view the process of collaboration because students could share plans as they were created. And through Zoom, at the end of the course, students could perform live for each other and receive feedback. The way that assessments were handled, there were milestones established at each stage of this project to help manage the workflow for students, especially because it's a remote project. That worked out very well, and more milestones are added on different iterations. The grading for those milestones helped to encourage cooperation by giving them just basically completion grade for that cooperation. And in the end, students received feedback from faculty and students in the way this project was done. So, but this is a different set of priorities reflecting a different kind of class. Very successful. If you want to see how that worked out, the earliest iteration, which was taught by Julie Brody, is highlighted in the article. Here's a second project I worked on last spring, the Transnational Feminisms course offered by Clara Romanodio. So the general point of teaching was to for students to research contemporary women's movements and analyze them within feminist frameworks. For, I should say, in different parts of the globe. It was the Transnational Feminist course. So group work was chosen for specific reasons here. One of which was that collaboration itself was viewed as a feminist practice. So, you know, within that kind of context, and that colored the way that the professor described what she was expecting with these different students. Another reason for the group work was to divide the workload again so that students could look at multiple movements in different cultures. And another feature of group work was that in order to manage the different groups, there was a student volunteer who served as a project manager, which I think is a thing. So this is a student volunteer. Okay, and as you're gonna see that schematically again. Now the reason this was a digital project was because it was contemporary work and they thought it engaged with public-facing material and should also be public-facing material. And for the technical aspect, students were not generally graded on their ability to perform with technology. Instead, the professor solicited a student volunteer to learn the technical skills for developing the student writing and research into a public platform, in this case, WordPress. So how is this assessed? This sort of, I cut off in the middle here, but students were assessed on their research and writing, and there were alternative incentives offered to students for doing things beyond the research and writing. So the project manager student ended up co-authoring a presentation with the professor. And something similar would have happened for the student volunteer in the technical skills, except that she became overwhelmed and had to drop out. And this is kind of in this case, there was a safety net, which was me, to step in and do the WordPress support for the students. So that's the thing. So if the thing I'm going to talk about later is if the technical element is not the important part for students, there are other ways around that, but make sure that you have some kind of support network for it. All right. So now that's giving you some framework. What I would like to do is, I'm going to stop sharing here. In a minute here, we're going to break out into groups. If I can manage Zoom in a healthy way. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I will send out activity 1. All right. So this is really a shared document for people in CODEX. If you go to that, then take some time to discuss with, take about 15 minutes. 15 minutes I think is good, to discuss with members of your team those different priorities and get them sorted out. If you're not in a team, if you're in a discussion group, I'm going to go back to sharing here. Talk to them about these, again, these concerns with you. Why are you teaching the subject? What's your investment in it? How do you want to teach it? Why have you chosen group work if you've chosen group work for your project? What do you see the function of this digital project being? And what kind of assessments are you able to make use of? So this is preliminary. Let's meet back here in 15 minutes, if that's good for people. So at 2:20 on my clock, but I don't know what it is on yours.
Yeah, and I'll do the breaking out of folks here. So as Alex mentioned, if you're part of a CODEX team, you should be part of your group. We've had some snafus with this week, so if that happens, hit the help icon in your room and you call us in to help. If you're not part of a CODEX team, we've kind of just randomly assigned you to a discussion group with I think probably 3 to 4 other folks. So I guess we'll see you all back here. And how many minutes, Alex? 15 minutes? Okay. All right. So good luck, and we'll see you soon. We'll be back.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, does anybody have anything they want to report out from their groups that you've thought of about in terms of like where the focus of this project is in terms of how it fits your particular kinds of your general teaching goals, or what you expect to get out of the group work and what you expect for this to serve as a digital project? Please feel free to jump in.
I can maybe jump in on
Please.
on the digital project part of it. For me, as I was thinking through the different questions, it was very clear that what I wanted to get out of the digital project was to get students to break out of old habits. I really wanted them to do a very close reading. And even with our student who's working with us, he's had to read the same text like 3 times already, you know, just to get the information out of it for this project. So I think that process, like it's more about the process than the product. That is something that's really attractive to me about a digital project.
So why is that a function? Why is this something in the digital project that's made available that wouldn't be there for them otherwise? Or what's?
I think most assignments, they just have to process they have to pull out a certain amount of data out of the text. And I think when they're reading, I'm doing a primary source document, there's a lot of weird references. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it's very easy to just sort of skim over it and just sort of like go to the passages that make sense, right? And just sort of skip the stuff that's a little bit complicated. But if you are actually asking them to pull out, like, okay, where were they on a particular date? Then they actually have to sit down and say, really look at the text and really say, like, wait, what was happening at this time? And what are the elements that I still need to do more research on, right? I can't just skip over it, right? I need to find out, like in our case, what was their beef with Portugal, right? Like, you know, find that out, like, right? You have to sort of you can't just gloss over it in the way that you might in a quick reading.
No, I think that's cool. I mean, I kind of remember that as being a challenge for me when I started college, because I think everything had been framed for me up to that point, you know, as readings, like or it was from contexts that were so familiar that didn't require much explanation. And then, you know, I took this course on the Iliad. That was one of the things. The first thing we read was the Iliad. And you start off in the Iliad, and even in the ancient world, they said, like, okay, well, you start off in medias res, which means to say you have no idea what's going on. But there's no explanation. You know, it's a very weird, disorienting experience for me. And I remember coming to the first day of class and having no idea what was going on. But then, you know, over time, like, and not knowing how to help myself. It's the other part of that. It's just sort of like, oh, I don't know what's going on, and then that doesn't trigger a process in my brain to figure out what's going on. It just shuts down. Like, I don't know what's going on. I guess this is what I'm looking at must be incomprehensible, you know, or something like that, and then just move on. I grew up reading encyclopedias. That was like my favorite form of reading as a kid. I liked things very, you know, everything organized with headlines like that. Anything else come out from these discussions about that you realize about your priorities for your projects, either in terms of how they fit your general teaching approaches, or what you see in the group projects as being of value, or what the digital context adds?
I'll add a couple of things. This is Mark Graham. So in terms of group work, I tend to have students work in pairs for 2, I think, pragmatic reasons. One is I have a much better chance of figuring out what's going on in the pair rather than in a larger group. And also, maybe to add something to you were giving benefits of group work. My experience of projects, whether they're written projects or some other kind of thing, when they're done in pairs, they tend to be better.
Yeah.
You know, the quality goes up and the quantity goes down for me. You know, I don't have as many things to look at, and they're all better. And students report that their learning was challenged by working with a partner in a good way. And then in terms of the digital part, so if I'm doing mapping and spatial thinking, that's pretty much all done with digital tools these days. You know, I would love to have students do hand-drawn maps, but we're kind of past that, although I might still play with that, and I have successfully, but they need to learn digital tools if they're going to have any experience with doing mapping. So,
well, these are good things to know, because then you will feel more confident about how it is you're assessing them, and like why it is that you're doing that, and you have a reason to do it. I think we've had a lot of discussions on our campus about what is an ideal size for group work. And when people ask me that question, I tell them that there are generally two answers that I hear going around. And one is 2, and the other one is 4.5. And one of the reasons why you get that 4.5 one is, especially if you're one of the functions of this group is to sift through large amounts of information. You know, so if that's the part, if you've got a group of people and you want them to break up a lot of individual work, you could probably find one person in a group of 4 to 5 people who's going to do a lot of work, and then one person who's going to do half as much work, and then a few other people who can do other kinds of things. But it's a decent kind of a division to divide up working group without being so ungainly that nobody actually takes charge, because it's too amorphous of a group, or no one knows what their responsibility is, or things like that. So that's why let's build that. Now, the 2 has a lot of benefits. One of the benefits that our faculty use it for is because in terms of inclusive pedagogies, a lot of faculty found that having a group of 3 meant that you got 2 against 1. And a lot of times those broke out in kind of an uncomfortable and familiar hierarchies as to who were the 2 and who was the 1. In order to help with that, a lot of times they did the 2-person projects. But I think that's a lot of times like the best kind of group you can get, as long as you have things for all those groups of people to be working on. You know, that can also be a burden on a professor if you have like if it's kind of a topic selection issue. Like that can also be something. But it's an initial amount of work. It's not an end kind of work. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, so we've gotten to about the halfway point, and I think this could be what I put in my schedule. This is being a time for a 10-minute break, which seems fitting within a 2-hour period, if that's good for people. If you have any other kinds, I'll stay on the line. If other people have anything they want to add from their discussion, just in smaller conversation. Otherwise, let's meet back here in 10 minutes. If that works for people. Okay, great. Well, welcome to part 2 for everyone. Let me share screen again. All right. So this is really the focus that I wanted to start with, but I wanted to build it out a bit more. Is my mic on? Yes. Okay. All right. So integrating assessments into a course, and why this is important. So one of the general approaches I use with faculty in talking about courses and course design is to compare something that people refer to as a coverage focus, where people start with topics they want to cover in a course, and then they sort of section that into what they think is a manageable workload. They posit an assessment for that amount of workload in the form of a paper or an exam, and then so students are able to accomplish this, and faculty are able to within those contexts of assessments figure out to some degree how well they're doing, and then the hope is that as they're going through the course, by the time they get to the end of the course, they really have understood the point of the course, and that's like based on things. And that's generally like a very common way of structuring a course, go back to whenever people start doing these courses. The problem then, one of the problems with that kind of a model then, is that faculty try to introduce innovations into that classroom, because the structure is fairly rigid and doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. So if faculty add in some activities to sort of break up the rhythm, students might enjoy that activity, but they don't really understand how it's related to the course, because it's not integrated into the assessment, and it doesn't really integrate it into the other elements of the course. So students may not take the activity seriously, because they feel it has no impact on their grades, or they may not know what to do with it because it's not familiar compared to the other things that they've been doing. So that's a general issue with what I'm referring to as orphan activities. So the backward design approach is often offered as a solution to this, which is rather than starting with content, start the other direction, start with what goals are in terms, especially with like learning objectives. Then based on the learning objectives, think how can I figure out if somebody is meeting that learning objective, and then figure out context for assessment based on learning objectives. Then after you have those contexts for assessment figured out, then design the different activities or materials, or incorporate the materials in a way that fits those assessments so that they're feeding into those contexts for assessment that then match with the goals, so that everything appears to be one unified course. And one of the things that the real advantage of this for this part is that the activities then can vary significantly if they're framed in a way that students know that they're being assessed in them in consistent ways that they're being assessed with the other kind of activities, and that all of these things feed into the larger goals of the course. So that's a general kind of issue, a general kind of approach. One of the sort of benefits and downsides to this is the backwards design approach requires more intentional planning from faculty. So that can mean it requires more time from faculty, but it can also mean they actually have time to reconsider what it is they're doing in the class and prioritize what they think is essential. If you go through this kind of backward design process, it's much easier to communicate goals with your students because they should be familiar with them from the start. You should just be able to relate what the current project is back to those goals through some kind of connector. And it should be easier to communicate requirements to outside faculty who might be helping off with some kind of aspect of the course, or community partners in the case of a community engaged learning course, or support staff in the form of some kind of a technology enhanced course, or other, or say librarians, if librarians are helping the students to design research projects in the course. Having this kind of framework helps those different people understand what is really required by the course. So this is a general kind of chart for making aligned activities. And this is not going to be super relevant to you, but this is based on a Latin class that I taught again about 15 years ago. So I have my objectives on one side over here. Then there are regular assessments beneath those objectives, and then the activities or whatever I did in the class in order to prepare students for the assessments that fit back into the objectives. Now this is a very kind of simple structure, and if you've taught a course before, then this may not be necessary because this already might be all intuitive. I think this kind of structure can be a good thing with a new course because there might be one of these boxes that's still empty, like a missing connection in the course. Say that you've got something that students want to learn and you've got a thing that you want them to learn it in, something, but you don't really have any way of measuring them learning it. Or vice versa, if you've got some kind of a goal and you've got an assessment for them, but there's nothing in the course that really prepares them for that assessment. It's just a good way to fill in boxes. In order to cover your bases, I should say. It's a good structure for that. This is a different thing. So here, I've adjusted this framework so that instead of thinking of, I'm not even thinking about the activities here. What I'm thinking about instead of is two processes of assessment, so that there's going to be some kind of a summative assessment, some kind of final assessment for an individual learning objective. But then in order to scaffold what they're learning, I want to have some kind of formative assessment. This can be helpful because you can have some variation in how these assessments are structured. So you could have a summative assessment, which is a graded project. And you can have a formative assessment, which is some kind of ungraded work. But you've got them laid out here in a way that you know that they're both going to be parts of your plan. And when you're actually planning your schedule and kind of the schedule for yourself, mark in like, oh, I should figure out here, I should make sure to check in with students until they know what's going on here. You can also vary things between group and individual work here. So you can have different structures where, say, students work as a group on some kind of a research component, and then that individually they write papers. Or conversely, they could each have defined graded contributions, or defined contributions at the formative stage that they're getting formative evaluation in, which is kind of a check plus kind of grading. And then there's a final project, which is the summative assessment, the main assessment, but it's done there. But they're assessed as a group, and how you arrange these things a lot of times is going to depend on the structure of the final product that you want out of them. But this is it's a good consideration for varying like the whole assessment strategy. Here's what I used for my model when I put together that Greek civilization course. My idea was I had students in the class who were first-year students. I had some who were second-year students, and there were some who were basically 300-level students. And if I went to the midterm, by the time they got to the midterm, they'd done a lot of basically first-year level work and some second-year level work. And then after the midterm, they no longer did any first-year level work. They did second-level work, leading into third-level work. So that was the way I structured that for a kind of mixed classroom assessment. So that the midterm was one assessment that dealt with lower levels, but starting to lead in with scaffolding for higher levels. And then by the end of the class, the final product, the final assessment, I really thought were up to the level of the course rather than where the students were at. So in terms of planning assessments over the course of a semester, if that's a problem you're dealing with, or even if it's not so much a matter of mixed assessments as it is about having, say, innovative elements to the students that they're not familiar with, having some kind of structure like that where you've got very simple assessments like direct multiple choice fill-in quizzes toward the beginning of the semester that might taper off into more free-form work, which deals with more higher critical thinking skills as you get to the end of the semester. That can be a good way of scaffolding work throughout the term. There's also, this is a structure for a general assessment plan. On the left here in the green, I've got out of class work, and in the right hand in the blue, I've got in class work. So, and some of this work is done in groups as indicated, and some is done individually. But this is a fairly complex workflow for a 3-hour course that meets once a week that involves different kinds of preparation beforehand. And here I've indicated through these yellow boxes the point at which faculty or teaching assistants actually observe student work. And what you may notice here is that different kinds of assessments feed into other kinds of assessments. And that can be a strategy for organizing how a course works, is students have some kind of preparatory assignment, which might or might not be reviewed by you, but then that feeds into another kind of assignment, which is reviewed by you or is peer reviewed, which then feeds into something else. So that's a good way of, it can be good to find some kind of structure then, this is a good way of balancing out certain problems in having highly structured versus unstructured classes, which I'm going to lay out here in a minute. A few notes about learning objectives. Usually learning objectives are written as a kind of cognitive activity that can be observed in a product or performance. And I think there are different kinds of learning objectives that will suit a course better, depending on whether the digital project is a main focus of the course or a side focus of the course. I think if the digital project is a small part of the class, I would be wary about having a learning objective at the top, which is just do a digital project. Because then it seems like it's something which is a separate element of the course. So it can work better if you have that performance or product, if you have that activity, that digital project activity, be a performance or a product of an objective which is assessed in other course activities as well. So it's a part of an entire assessment structure and that they're familiar with throughout. It's also very good here, it can help students, especially if you're transparent about these things, and you link these things, you link these learning goal descriptions in these different assessments so that students can see that continuity right in front of them. That can be a bit burdensome, and that maybe that's not worth it in the daily quiz. Maybe it is worth it in the syllabus. You kind of have to figure out for yourself how to format these things in a way that students will actually read them and perceive them in a way that helps them understand the value of the work they're doing. On the other hand, if a project is the main or final element of a course, it may be good to look at other kinds of course assessments, plan your assessment strategy as a way of preparing them for that by setting up other assessments which are formative for that project. And in that case, you could have, say, elementary digital skills be valid assessments that are leading up into this big project. And you could have, the virtuosity of performance of those digital skills be a part of the final evaluation in a major way because students have been prepared for it throughout the course. Okay, now here I've got a series of trade-offs I want to go through with you. And these are things I want you to be thinking about in the second activity that we go through. So do you have a highly structured group project or digital project, or do you have a loosely structured project? So there are different trade-offs here. So a highly structured project will keep students on track and help prevent conflict in groups. Okay, so if everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, then there's less chance for them to get at each other's throats. On the other hand, a loosely structured project lets students sort it out themselves, allows for some more creativity in how they carry things out, but that can create problems in groups, and it can create other kinds of problems in support. If you have lots of different students who are, something we talked about in one of these discussion groups, if you have students who have different kinds of technology platforms they're using, because those rules haven't been set out beforehand, then they might reach some kind of point where they don't know how to make their thing work or why it's not working. You're not familiar with it. You don't have anyone on staff who knows how to support it. So it can allow them the freedom to examine and explore things, but there's also the risk that they won't be able to complete it because of that. So there are trade-offs here. A second kind of set of trade-offs. Do you grade students on cooperation? And this is the thing. So, and again, I'm not saying that there is a firm right or wrong answer. There is a team learning model which relies heavily on students being graded on cooperation. I think if you're going to have that in your class, it's good to depersonalize these ratings with rubrics, and it's good to accustom them to the ratings by having them done frequently and consistently. So if students have a project, if you have one, how did people in the group get along great at the end of the class, and everybody sandbags the person they don't like and drops down their ratings, then that's going to make you the one who's unpopular. That's the thing. All the anger is going to transfer to you. But if people know the structure they're being evaluated by every week, that can actually help to improve their behavior toward each other. That's at least the case of how that team-based learning project role moves or operates. If you are grading cooperation, it gives you the ability to give students roles and to evaluate them on those roles. If you're doing that, it can also be good to have students rotate between roles over the course of the semester so that they don't feel that they were unjustly evaluated by being forced to do work that they are not accustomed to. There are other ways to manage the relationship between group work and individual work in order to improve cooperation. You can have group work feed into individual summative assessments so that they're getting the benefits of cooperation while actually being graded on their individual work. Like Clara did in her transnational feminisms group class, you can have groups appoint project managers or team leaders that help them keep them on track and help report issues to you as they progress. One thing that was another Kenyon faculty member does very frequently in group work that Joe mentioned earlier is Simon Garcia. He makes a practice of having students credit each other's contributions as a way of creating this kind of gratitude culture and recognition culture within individual group work. So there are other kind of strategies that don't involve grading as well. So that's something. Another question, are digital skills assessed? Are they assessed but not graded? These are some options. So one thing you can do, you can grade them. You can first off, if it really is important to the work and it's important to the project, I think, and you communicate it well to students, then that totally makes sense to grade them on their performance of digital skills and and to grade them in a real way. If you're not as committed to it, then there are other ways of mitigating that emphasis, such as grading those digital skills, like have them complete an online tutorial and they get some kind of completion grade for it, or something like they send you their certificate for completing it. But it fits into a completion grade, it's less stressful. Instead of having students be more creative in terms of the digital output, use templates or have them make tweaks to existing projects as part of the project so that they're not responsible for a high level of technical knowledge. Another option, like I did in my wiki project, have them use a very accessible platform. If they're using a very accessible platform, then that should be a way that they can complete the project and do it creatively within the standards of your discipline, but not actually need to develop digital skills. Another thing I've seen people do is to have students complete a reflection essay on the project rather than grading the project itself, so that you're grading them on metacognition or dividing the grade between this kind of metacognitive activity and the actual output, depending on how you want to mitigate those grades or how important you think understanding the product is versus completing the product. If you want them if you think that digital skills are important, but you don't want them to impact the general grade, you can reduce the scale of the project and its effect on grades. That's another kind of option. If you don't at all care about them learning about the digital material, but you think it's a good context for them to apply other skills, you can have somebody else handle the technical aspect. Like you can have a student volunteer who's familiar with the product, or you can have some kind of technology support person handle the technological elements and just have students focus on the disciplinary aspects, if you have that available. But these are some different strategies. Another question here, how frequent do you make assessments? So a benefit to frequency is that it keeps students on track, and if you are checking the assessments, it lets you anticipate problems before they become catastrophes. So if you're having them check it every week with you, then you will know if there's dysfunction in the group and you can find ways to deal with that. If you are working in a remote environment, as many of us are going to be doing in the fall, frequent assessments could be a good way to check in with students and make sure that they have not drifted off into the ether somewhere. But these benefits also come with their own drawbacks. One drawback is that one of the comments that we got back from students, not about their own professors, but about other professors during the remote learning experiment in the spring, was that when faculty gave them lots and lots of small assessments to keep them on track, students thought of it as busy work. And that was unpopular with them. So that can be another drawback. I also personally, I do not like being graded when I was on what I consider to be formative assessments. You know, if somebody sent out reading questions and they had us answer the reading questions, and I answered the reading questions, but not as well as this other person, and I got a 4 out of 5, and I kept getting a 4 out of 5 every week. You know, that can be infuriating to students as well. So students can feel nickel and dimed. That's what I put there. Another downside to frequent assessment is on you. If you are putting out all of these small assessments, that creates the requirement that you actually look at them. And that could be overwhelming for faculty, especially in these online environments where you can probably create a whole bunch of assignments and not realize how much click time it takes to go through every screen and add that little check or check plus to the bottom of the grading environment. So some options for managing this frequency problem: having group formative assessments so that you can have lots of small assessments, but they don't require a lot of time for you to look at them because each group is completing one rather than each individual. Having rubrics and checklists help to speed up the grading process and also direct students to what they're supposed to be doing. And another thing that I've seen here in faculty in the remote teaching in the spring was that faculty would have infrequent feedback, but highly personal feedback. So meet me for half an hour on this day, and let's talk about your progress over the course of the semester. If you have something like a small seminar, you can do that, or if you can space out over the course of the semester, that students really can see the value in that. Okay, so now we're at the time for a second activity, which I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to stop sharing so that you don't see everything going on my screen. All right. Now this should also be available to you, shared with you. Okay, so this is a kind of formative and summative assessment map, which is one of the things I showed you. I think that that could be a good point of discussion for you and your team members for right now, depending on where you are in your project. So I thought this, if we can break out into those groups again, Ben. But before we do that, for those of you who are not in groups, if you could talk to each other about these kinds of issues that we've had here, say the level of structure in assessments, the grading of cooperation, whether or not you're assessing digital skills, and the frequency of assessments, what your opinions are on those. And I think we could probably get that done in 10 minutes if we can, Ben, if that sounds good. So I'll shave that a little bit short from what I had scheduled. But if everyone can meet us back here in 10 minutes and talk about what you saw here.
Okay.
Thanks again, Ben, for managing the group breakout part of this.
Don't thank me yet.
Okay.
Until we break up. Okay. Well, then that will put us back at about we'll just say 3:15.
3:15 is good.
It's like 11 minutes. Okay. We'll see you all soon. If anyone has trouble, again, use the help icon in your room. See you soon.
Great. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. By the way, if you want to look at any of the materials, including the presentation, this is the general link to all the worksheets and the presentation for the folder on my Google Drive. So my CODEX folder. For simplicity's sake, so you can, when I had to make myself a Word doc that just had all the links from things I've been looking at CODEX from our project, and a separate one for the ArcGIS stuff, just for that, because I want to get to the back to the ArcGIS and finish it by the end of the week, but I know I don't have that time for that today. But anyway, all right. So did any good discussion come out of that second group activity that people want to share? Please do so if you can. I'm having trouble hearing audio. I hear some. I don't know if that's me, or is that me hearing my own audio from Ben? No.
Nope, I'm muted.
You're muted.
Well, no, I'm not muted. But.
Okay. Anyway, so I hope that people, I mean, if anybody has anything to offer, please go ahead and jump in. So one of the things I would like to find a better way to visualize these kinds of iterative processes for student work and for assessment, including how it is that faculty observe these different inputs and outputs at every stage. I've done that in a few classes, but if anybody is willing to talk to me about how they do that, I would really like to hear that, because especially on a group project like this, I think it can be valuable. Do you feel any more confident about any of these issues, about like where you stand? I guess one thing I can do is I can go back through my list of trade-offs and see where people stand. How about that? So how about highly structured versus loosely structured? How do people feel about this for their courses? Like where do you stand on giving students the freedom to do what they will in terms of technology or in terms of managing groups, versus setting very firm standards for, say, which roles students have, or say only giving them a single platform to work in? What are people's view on that?
Well, in our group, we had decided earlier that we were going to just offer the class the option to use Scalar, so that we didn't have people all over the place that we would have to support when they hit a roadblock. And since everybody's using the same tool, they could always reach out to another classmate to get an answer without waiting for ETS to answer it, or the professor.
if you can find a way to have like a distributive knowledge base for the technology in the classroom, like that is a huge asset. And that's something I started observing more of when like I was helping some foreign language faculty or modern language faculty here on campus with the off-campus tools. Is that like I didn't really have to do much as soon as the students got into them, because they are to some extent they're digital natives. But anyways, if the product has a good user interface, they have a general kind of familiarity with what a user interface is, that they can usually figure out some things and start contributing things, and also provide support on different platforms. Like, oh, on a Mac, don't press that, press this, or that kind of thing. So I see that as a huge amount of value, and I think constraining the choices for platforms is a good way to get like a kickstart there. If it's still a flexible platform, and I think that Scalar is, as far as I could tell for that. The note I'm seeing.
Sorry,
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But I saw a contrasting opinion there from Katie that I thought I'd love to hear.
Yeah, this is good. Katie, did you want to say this, or do you want me to say this?
No, I'll say it. Sorry. It's a little, I'm sitting outside and there's a helicopter flying overhead. So, sorry. I like being structured in terms of deadlines and project goals, right? To make sure that people are hitting certain kind of milestones, and to make sure that work is progressing well, more flexible in terms of what tool they use, as long as it meets kind of the learning outcomes we've set up.
No,
although, you know, I need to think about, sorry.
No, please.
Okay. The helicopter. I don't know if it, maybe think that I'm better at it than I am, because, you know, I try to give people students flexibility, and they often tend to all pick the same format. So maybe I'm not kind of selling and getting them to think through the other options enough.
Yeah, no, the one problem that you sometimes face with students is this overchoice issue, though. So sometimes constraining options to a few can be good.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of thinking about these projects on multiple axes, and having, say, one axis be structured and another axis be less structured. So in my my Greek civilization project, I did have a series of milestones, but at the same, that they were set up, and I had specific content, areas of content that were required of every project. So in those respects, they were very similar. However, those were general enough that, given their specific choices of which topic they chose, the individual content they filled in could be wildly different, because it could be cultural, it could be political, it could be social, it could be anything. So depending on what they focused on, as long as it had a general standard, but at the same time they had a structure to rely on, and students weren't just starting from scratch; they weren't just floating freely. But thank you for that. Katie lives near the hospital. Okay, note about that.
Sorry. That's what the noise is.
No, so this is the thing. I am one of my first. I wanted to ask at the general forum at Kenyon today, are we within range of a life flight helicopter in the event that our roads are closed off or something like that? This to me is but I thought that would be too disruptive. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the life flight helicopter. Forcing choices, yeah. If you could have like two choices, if you can have here, yeah. If you can have here's the thing, and have them both be supported, I think that's good. Or if you can have them choose between something which is, here's the thing which is very well supported, and you can or it's very easy to learn, and here's a stretch choice that will require more from you, but I'm not going to give you a better grade for it. It's like this is just for your own creativity. Can you, if you choose to do something more creative with this or better looking, then maybe that'll help your portfolio. But otherwise, you're still being evaluated the same way. So make sure if you're giving them constrained choices, that you're spelling out the consequences for what those choices will be in terms of workload and how that'll affect the grade. But otherwise, I think it's a good model. Okay, so this is also feeding into the Q&A time. Does anybody else have any general questions about that weren't answered? You'd like to ask now? We've got a few minutes left. Are people feeling any more confident about their decisions about how they're going to assess students, or do you feel as in the wild as you were yesterday in the afternoon? It's a tall order, you know. But part of the thing I wanted to communicate with you is, like, there's no choice that's going to be all right. There's no choice that's going to be all wrong. There are going to be consequences in terms of student satisfaction, student buy-in, and your satisfaction. If you're expecting things of a high quality and you know, this is set up and things are not set up for them to deliver that, then you're not going to be satisfied with the course. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for the kind remarks. But yeah, so I see this as a series of trade-offs, and I do if people want to contact me about individual projects, I am going to be working with Joe and Micah on our Mapping Cicero's Letters projects. But other than that, I'm also just schedule a time with me, and I'm happy to bounce ideas off of you or have you bounce them off me. I'm always happy to hear what other people are doing, because like at some conferences I've been to, like I can't remember if this is POD or if this is the OSU Innovate conference, but they have a Steal My Idea session. I think that's a valuable thing. I know people out there are trying all different kinds of things all the time. And if you don't have the opportunity to share that with other people, a lot of times they'll die on the vine. But please, if you know, I'm always willing to hear how people are setting things up, because we're looking at a lot of challenges this fall. And I appreciate people providing their own kind of preferences and ideas to help me work with a larger variety of people, a larger variety of projects. Anything I can do to help, I'm very, very willing to. In any case, I appreciate the effort people have made. Is you any questions? I thought I heard some scratchiness. No?
It could have been me. I unmuted and went, so
yeah,
it could have been me. No, I didn't want to cut it short. I just wanted to say a big thank you. I see a lot of people are thanking as well. A great framework. I really like the thinking about trade-offs. I mean, I think that's really important, because we've been talking about best practices and things like that. And of course, all the answers are it depends on goals or the needs of the project, and then the trade-offs. I think that's a really important point. So thanks. I guess I'll also say we've been recording this, so we'll distribute a recording to this session, as well as the slides and other templates and materials that Alex shared. And as Alex mentioned, again, primarily for the CODEX teams, if tomorrow afternoon in our community forum for the CODEX Institute, we're going to try to focus that discussion on assessment. And so if you have questions before that, Alex is certainly on hand. Otherwise, bring those questions and thoughts to the forum tomorrow afternoon. And and thank you all for coming and spending a couple hours on a hot Wednesday with us. And I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Nice. So everybody, in the words of Reverend Lovejoy, short answer yes with an if, long answer no with a but. That's anyway. But thanks everybody for participating. I hope to see you around the rest of this workshop. See you soon.